Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rudi Page, and welcome to Vaccine Confidence Dialogues. So for the next hour or so, we will be having a dialogue around the Vaccine Confidence Support Programme for NHS England. And this evening, our guests will be Dr John Ndikum, Bev Bogle, and Bishop Francis Waihenya. So this will be a series of online dialogues for communities and the workforce using trusted messengers, transformational influencers, and a wide range of experts from across the African and Caribbean communities here in the UK. So our priorities are to ensure that our communities are informed, receive the reassurance in order for them to make their choice. So I'd first like to call on Dr. John.
Hello.
Hello,
Rudi.
Evening. Good evening, Dr. John.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm very, very well. And just quick hello, Bev Bogle. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm Bev Bogle, former nurse.
Bishop Waihenya.
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great to see you all. This is the first program of a series. So Dr. John, there's some key questions that the community have been really asking, and one of the first one is they really want to understand is the vaccine is safe. So how can you reassure the community the vaccine is safe?
Okay, Rudi. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me on, and I'm grateful to be here on the panel with everybody today. I'm happy to address that question first of all. So what's very clear is that there seems to be a lack of understanding generally, not just in our communities, but just generally across the globe. People asking, is it safe? I think first of all, there's a plethora of information that's causing a lot of confusion. People are having trouble separating the wheat from the chaff, and I think that's where we as scientists and doctors must inform the populace. So people want to understand what the scientific basis of these vaccines are. What's the evidence base? And there seems to be this confusion around how fast the vaccine has been pushed through. But what I hope people at this stage understand is that there are 4 phases of clinical trials. In the preclinical phases, a lot of research goes into understanding the scientific basis of vaccines, and these vaccines are years in the making. Essentially, in scientific research, you can take one piece of research and that can form the basis for another piece of research. And that's exactly what's happened with these vaccines. For example, the Pfizer vaccine, it affects the immune system. The scientists who developed it were experts in immunology, which they use in their field. And a lot of the findings from that were able to be extrapolated and utilized for this, to obviously manage this virus, which affects the immune system. So I think, just to answer it in a more curt or short manner, people aren't clear about the safety because they're not clear about the science underpinning vaccines.
Right, and of course you mentioned the Pfizer, but of course we've been primarily, most of us have had the AstraZeneca jab. So is there anything that you want to say to that, around that?
Yeah, so what we have here are just different modes of the vaccine, of efficacy, really. So with the Pfizer vaccine, they're getting a piece of mRNA, which is like DNA, and it enters the body, and inside the body, it creates the spike protein. Then your body recognizes that and creates antibodies against it. The AstraZeneca vaccine, on the other hand, it's the actual spike protein itself, and then they get a viral capsule. So it's essentially like putting a piece of the virus inside a car, putting it inside the body. That shield dissolves, and then your body recognizes the spike protein. So essentially, we need to focus on what's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is for your body to go, oh my God, there's danger. I'm going to mount an immune response, which is I'm going to deploy or create some infantrymen, and then when the virus then enters your body again, the immune system has a memory and can mount a similar immune response. I hope
okay, so thank you for that, John. At this point, I must let everyone understand that the vaccines are free of charge and available from the NHS only. And the aim of the vaccines is, as Dr. John has said, to help protect against the virus. Also, it's really important to know is that you do not require an NHS number or GP registration. And there are no immigration checks either as it comes to this. And okay, so just in terms of people still continually ask about, they want more information about the vaccine. So even when information has been given, and I think what I'll do here, I'll bring in Bev Bogle on this particular question. Given what Dr. John has said, Beverly, and you would have experienced this, where people continually say, I need more information. And then maybe Dr. John might be able to speak to that when he kind of hears your story there.
Okay. Thanks for having me on this program, Rudi. Yes, I'm Beverly Bogle, and I represent the Kiwanis Club of Brixton and also other Kiwanis clubs in the London Orbital. My experience has been exactly what Rudi has said, and I endorse most of the stuff that Doctor has said. People do find it difficult for you to convince them, so you've got to go through this phase of telling them your full experience, as in family, friends, people of the community that you come across. And I do get calls on that, and I do get a lot of messages negative things being said to me, but I manage that by answering the question and by researching and sending them like screenshots of things that I've researched myself. I also explain the best I can to them that these things, as Doctor has said, that they've been scientifically in the pipeline for a long time, and it's just that other elements have been developed to combine it together. I also advise people, if they have got a problem, the person to speak to before, it's their GP. The GP is someone of confidence. They need to speak to them if they're concerned about allergies, medication, illnesses that they might have had, that they're scared that because of all these false WhatsApp and messages that's been put out there in the social media. Yes, family and friends. Even today, my sister called me to say, oh, sis, I've gone and I've taken my vaccine, and says, yes, I'm happy that you've done that. Yesterday, I had another person who did the same. Yes, gradually, I'm doing the best I can to coerce and convince people that the vaccine is quite safe. And it's explained to them if they've got any allergies, they should communicate that to whoever is going to be doing their assessment, and also that the scientific base measures are quite safe. I myself had the Oxford vaccine, and I've got friends that took both doses of the AstraZeneca, the other one, and they're in their 80s. and they're quite okay. So there's
Great.
nothing wrong with them. The only thing I've had is exactly what they say. You might get flu symptoms and that, but it's very hard to educate them, and we can only continue to do that.
Yeah.
Educate, explain, and reinforce, because it's quite important for them to have this vaccine, especially the people of our ethnic community. They've got this myth about them, things happening to them that are quite not significant to their religious belief, or what they self might feel about with their
Yeah.
diets. I get that too. People saying what they might eat. I says no, it doesn't affect your diet. But if you've got an allergy, you need to inform your assessors that you have got that. But it's quite safe to have the vaccine. I've not known of anyone who has had any reaction or had any negative. They're actually saying they've had it. The other thing is, you've got to what I came across is that some older folks in their 70s plus, they tend to think once they've had the vaccine, they're immune to the virus. They're saying, why do I have to wear a face mask? Why have I got to sanitize? I've explained to them that's essential and it's necessary, because you're not immune. It's just a protective measure to stop you from getting the virus at a level where you'll have to be hospitalized, and you can manage that illness at home if you do contract the virus. And that's
Right.
my story. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Beverly. Dr. John, is there anything that you want to follow up on that before we come to Francis and his story?
Yeah, thank you, Beverly, for your comments. I really appreciate you touching on your experience and obviously sharing your efforts to educate and inform the community. It's absolutely vital. I'm just going to speak to your point about sharing your anecdotal experience, and obviously make sure that people do share their experiences. Although myriad people, I think 120,000 people in the United Kingdom have lost their lives due to COVID. It's still quite surprising, actually. It comes as a surprise to many healthcare professionals that there are many people in the UK who still haven't met people who've been through the experience of having COVID or have lost a loved one. But I think it's important that people hear those stories from healthcare professionals such as you and I, and also from those who have lost loved ones, because COVID is very unpredictable, and we haven't yet determined the variables that lead to worse outcomes. We're beginning to understand that, but to think that we have established that fully, I don't think any scientist or doctor can say that. So what that means is that we should all be careful, have as many layers of protection as we can. Obviously, we know the ones that work, which is hand washing, face masks, social distancing, and obviously having the vaccine when you're able to. So thank you for sharing that. Now, on the point of the AZ vaccine, actually, Rudi, I did touch on the Pfizer vaccine, the scientific basis of it. As for the AZ vaccine, COVID-19 is actually the colloquial name for SARS-CoV-2 virus. SARS-CoV-1 was the original SARS virus, which affected populations in Southeast Asia several years ago. And one scientist, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, please forgive me if she's watching, she made it her life's work to investigate the SARS family of viruses. And lo and behold, SARS-CoV-2 comes out, and a lot of her research could be extrapolated and could be applied to this particular vaccine. So you have an expert at Oxford University who has a very robust basis of research upon which to build a vaccine. I think the second thing that's very important to highlight is the alarm that's being caused by this political debacle about the incidence of clots as a result of the AZ vaccine. And I'm quite astonished, and I think it's quite disappointing that people's lives should be, I would say, compromised in a fashion to suit various political agendas. I won't say any more than that. What I will say is that people must examine things statistically and in context. Okay, so we have a population here in the United Kingdom of 22 million, I believe the estimate is, who've had the first vaccine. And I think what's being quoted in the media is 3 deaths. So I was just in discussion with some friends the other day, and I think I calculated that the risk or the probability of having a clot from those statistics is 0.00004%. Now, there are other conditions situations that can put you at greater risk of having a clot. Being obese can do the same thing. Being on the oral contraceptive pill. Some people have conditions that predispose them to clots. And in fact, COVID itself, I've seen many patients with COVID having numerous clots all over the place. So when you look at things in context and look at the risk and benefit, you say, okay, fine. What's going to cause me clots first? The vaccine with a 0.004 times 10 to the, 0.0004%, or COVID itself, which will cause you a very high risk of clots. I think it's disappointing that there's so much confusion online. But what I would say, the more practical advice to people listening to this is, first of all, examine the source, consider where it's coming from. And if you have a scientific background, then do look at the original papers and listen to what the scientists are saying and listen to what the doctors are saying. And obviously, if you know people who've been affected, such as Beverly, or who've have loved ones who've been affected, ask about their experiences as well. Now, my final point is about side effects and so forth, which is something that people are very concerned about. Side effects can occur with any drug. Paracetamol itself can cause side effects. Some people say, well, this is just a trial drug. But actually, every drug is always in post-marketing surveillance. So every drug is always being observed. And when side effects that are unexpected do occur, they're raised and inserted into the British National Formulary. Now, it would be dishonest of me and irresponsible of me as a doctor to say it's 100% foolproof, you won't have any side effects. I have side effects when I take the flu jab. I become unwell for a couple of days. Everyone's constitution, everyone's immune system is slightly different. There will be slightly different reactions. So what Beverly said is actually on point. If you have conditions, especially immune-related conditions, it's very important to speak to your doctor. And if you're involved with a specialist, then to speak to them as well. Some people's bodies won't mount an immune response. People with HIV, people who are immunocompromised, people with leukemia. Okay, and the important thing to know is that the vaccine is not the only option that will be available. I'm leading a clinical trial at the moment of an antibody cocktail for COVID, and there are many trials happening. So there will be very many options available. Now that's a positive thing, but when it comes to data and confusion, there'll be a lot more, I suppose.
Right. Okay.
A lot more data to become confused about.
Right. Thanks for that. I'd now like to bring Bishop Francis Waihenya. So, Bishop, please tell us your COVID story.
Thank you, Rudi, for having me. When Doctor was actually sharing, I was reflecting on the role that we have played as ministers of the gospel. Over the years, you have been ministering the word to different people and telling them, selling a product called heaven, which they have never seen, and they have never been there, and they believe, and they believe. And so it is quite difficult now to sell a product they can even see. They can hear people who have witnessed exactly how it works, scientific knowledge and everything, and yet they have doubts. So these are human beings. So we will continue doing that. We won't give up because we haven't given up. I've been in the ministry now for 45 years. I haven't given up. I'm still selling heaven as a product. And so we will continue doing that. Back to your question, Rudi. My wife and I were infected with the virus in January. And I thank God that my wife was not hit very hard like I was. But for me, it was the most painful experience that I have had. I went through a week of excruciating pain, muscle pain, and constant gasping for breath. I had fever, I had severe nausea, and had lack of appetite, which made me lose 5 kilos in 2 weeks. And one of the lessons I would say I have learned, and I must say at this point, I have already had my first jab. I'm waiting for my second one. So for those afraid that there are side effects and all that, I can confirm personally that I went through it quite smoothly, and I'm anxiously waiting for the second one. But one of the lessons I learned, as my colleagues have pointed out, is that there are some statements on social media and even from the church leaders, which are very misleading. When I was going through all this, there is one quote that has been quoted by many people, and this is in Psalms 91. I'm sure very many people have quoted that. Psalms 91, verse 10 and 11, where it says, "No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. For he shall give you," now God shall give you his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. Now, when somebody is quoted, has this kind of quotation, and on top of that, you tell the person, again, another quotation in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2, which is nearly similar. When you pass through waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. And when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burnt, nor shall the flame scorch you. Now, when they are given a situation like this, going through coronavirus, you don't need to be afraid of it. And that has made very many people become ignorant of COVID protocols, resulting in many people suffering. But when people are secured with this kind of verses, which are picked among many, and they should also explain to people, and that is what we should do as church leaders. We should explain to people that Christians also suffer, and they can get the virus like anybody else. And when they suffer, they should also know that there are situations when they may never know in their why they're suffering. When they're allowed to suffer, sometimes they will never know why they are actually suffering, because God will never reveal everything. But in the midst of this suffering, there is a situation where we need to trust the sovereign will of God. Like many people have suffered, faithful people. So, and Christ himself experienced this kind of physical pain and suffering and rejection and abandonment. So my COVID journey, I would say I have many people I have had who have gone through this. In fact, I was on the telephone call just an hour before we started. And one of my very, very close ministers of the gospel right now is in hospital. And these things are going on. But we should be, the leaders have played a role in misleading people. And it is critical that we take responsibility, that even if there are all these promises in the Bible, there are also promises of God allowing people to go through suffering for his own sovereign purpose. And I think that is why Jesus himself says in John chapter 16, verse 33, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." So the truth about overcoming is what sustains Christians when suffering threatens to overwhelm them. When people understand all these things, they understand, as the doctor was explaining, how vaccines work. We keep giving this information. That is the best way And we continue believing that people will understand. Even if you win one person or two, that is a positive thing. And I believe this is what we should continue doing.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Dr. John, before I come to the next question, is there anything that you'd like to add to what Bishop Waihenya has just said?
Well, I'd like to applaud Bishop Waihenya for his very honest and obviously touching discourse as well. And congratulate you on your efforts. And I'm glad that you and your wife are well. I'm excited for you with the upcoming second vaccine. I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Dr. John, the next important question, and I must stress again for those who may be just joining us, this is the Vaccine Confidence Dialogues with Dr. John Bev Bogle and Bishop Francis Waihenya. And this program series of dialogues is aimed at the African and Caribbean communities, particularly here in London, where there has been a low uptake of the vaccine in the priority groups in terms of elders, people with long-term conditions, men. And so it's important that we get the message out. So that's what this series of dialogues is about. So our final question that we're going to consider now, Dr. John, it's about the understanding of how the virus is spread among families, at work, and across local communities. We touched on it earlier on, but transmission. So could you again take us step by step through transmission?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Rudi. So last March, when we first got wind of this virus, at least in the UK, we were informed that it was spread by droplets, and that informed a lot of our policies, which did actually work. Some research came out of China, which actually said, look, this might be airborne, so we need to be very careful, even when we're indoors. What I'm trying to get at is that the understanding of how the virus spreads is still evolving. We've now established that it is airborne, so social distancing alone won't work. So wearing masks is very important. We've seen that around the world. That layer of protection does in fact reduce rates of transmission. Now, to your original question, which is people want to know about not only about the spread of the virus, but also what they can do in light of these facts to prevent transmission to themselves and to their family members. So we know that there's various layers of protection that the government and governments around the world have put forward. So washing your hands, there's alcohol gels all over the place now, that's now become a habitual thing. Social distancing is one of those measures. So we know that when people are out having walks, distancing, there is less transmission. We know that masks are a significant layer, simple but effective. And masks, not even just masks, it's the face covering, seems to reduce transmission by between 85 to 95%. And when two people are wearing masks, transmission is reduced much more. This is important because people might say, well, I've had the vaccine. I think it was Beverly or Bishop Waihenya who mentioned it, or was it you, Reed? I'm not sure. Someone on the panel did say, people have asked the question, well, I've had the vaccine. Why do I still need to take these precautions? Well, the studies are telling us that vaccines are giving up to, between 76% and 95% protection. That still leaves some room for infection. And when you look at the individual might not have necessarily between 76 and 95% of transmission because of the variations in different human beings. We also know that there are new variants of the virus coming out. And although there is crossover in immunity, that crossover doesn't mean high level of protection of one variant will produce equally high level of protection in another. So these variants are going around. It's important that people continue to have these simple, to implement these simple layers of protection, to not only protect themselves, but also their family members. And the final point, the protection isn't just for the individual. Having the vaccine reduces the amount of the virus to below a threshold at which it would overwhelm your immune system. That doesn't mean that there won't be small amounts of virus in your body. They may very well be. And as we know, there are people around whose immune systems just don't mount a response. So if we're careless...
Sorry to interrupt you there, Dr. John, but could you go over that point again? Because I think it's such an important point that you made. Just if you could just go through that again, because I think it's really...
Happy to go through that again. So vaccines cause deployment of, I like to think of it in terms of, a military, because essentially the immune system is the military of the human body. So the vaccine prompts your body to deploy soldiers, and those soldiers attack the enemy as much as they can. Okay. The point is to bring the amount of virus below the threshold at which it would overwhelm the body, which would overwhelm your body and cause illness. Okay. So the vaccine causes the amount of virus. So above this threshold, you become ill, you become sick, you could die. The vaccine causes the immune system to bring the virus below the threshold.
Yes.
But there's still a small amount of virus inside your body. So if you're not wearing a mask, and for example, your best friend's mother happens to have leukemia, there's no point in her having the vaccine, because this variant of leukemia means that she won't mount an immune response. You go to her house, you don't wear the mask, you don't take precautions. Now she hasn't got an immune system that can bring virus below a certain threshold. So the small amount that you have that won't affect you may very well harm her. Okay. So that people must keep that in mind. I've had COVID in April. My wife recently had it, and I didn't get it again. So it seems I may have an antibody response, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't wear masks, because I'm very conscious of the fact that there are other people who may be harmed if I'm not as careful as I've been so far.
Okay, thank you. That's such an important point. And could you explain long COVID, please?
So when we speak of long COVID, we mean the long-term, medics will say sequelae, or the long-term effects, the continued effects of having had COVID. Okay, so we know that COVID is multisystemic, which means it affects multiple systems and multiple organs in the body. Now, when COVID itself is eradicated from the body, those effects, some of them can remain for a long time. So some people can suffer from continued exhaustion, continued shortness of breath, fatigue, and their risk of clots may actually still persist. Okay, so long COVID is the feeling, the symptoms that you get as a result of the ongoing physiological processes triggered by COVID. And it affects different people differently. We don't know why. We're trying to establish why. Once we know why, it'll be much easier. It'll be easier to say, okay, fine, that person's 37 years old, they have these conditions, this is the type of long COVID they're at risk of. But for now, we don't know, and the virus is so unpredictable that there have been cases of children who were previously well, who are now wheelchair bound. So there's the acute or the immediate effects of COVID, which we all know about, and there's the long-term consequences. So I shouldn't assume as a young man that if I got COVID, I'll be absolutely fine. We haven't yet figured out who gets what and why.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that. Now, as we come down to the end of the program, I'm going to ask you all to just give a message to the community in terms of what we've been trying to do. So I'll come to you first, Bev. And I think you wanted to make a point on.
Well, my point is the same. Just get advice. Don't be afraid. Go to your GP, speak to him. Don't hide or hinder any elements that you think you're allergic to, or you've got any ongoing illnesses. That's very important, because I've been an assessment nurse and I know that patients do that type of thing. And just tell them, try and explain to them the best you can how important it is for you to have this vaccine, and to also educate them that it's a vaccine that will protect them, but it's not a cure, so they cannot track the vaccine again. They still have to take the necessary measures of wearing the face mask, sanitizing, but for in any eventuality they might contract the virus again, which is most likely very little chance they will be protected, and they won't be 95-75% of chances that they won't be hospitalized. They'll be more sort of built in their immune system to fight the virus. And it's very important that, especially in the ethnic group, that they must, for their sake and their families and their friends, because we've lost too many lives already, it's important that they do. I'm still trying my best, still working hard to communicate the best I can, still trying to coerce some people around me to do the same. Okay?
Thank you very much for that. And Bishop Francis, and you've already demonstrated to us that the vaccine is not a challenge to your biblical principles. So the last few words from you before I go back to Dr. John.
Thank you, Rudi. Yes, vaccine is not a challenge to my biblical principles, because as far as I'm concerned, vaccine is preventative medicine. And if prevention is better than cure, as the Dutch philosopher Erasmus said, then I have a duty to prevent myself. And I have a duty to let others know that they have a duty to prevent themselves. Because again, it's very clear to me that God has made me a steward of my own body. And I have a responsibility as a good steward to take care of my body. So I will continue sharing this and saying it is critical that people listen, admit the truth that has been researched scientifically, and take the jab. If they don't do it today, I will repeat again tomorrow, and I won't give up. I will not be weary, but I'll continue repeating this until I win a soul in terms of making them agree to receive the jab.
Thank you very much for that. So, Dr. John, just before you say your final thoughts on, and just to reiterate some of the key points, we've also have the challenge within African and Caribbean health and social care workers. There's also a lower uptake, and obviously they're dealing with vulnerable people. Could you give us your perspective on that from the workforce perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously heard about the low uptake in the African Caribbean community, and including the low uptake in non-medical professionals within our communities. I'm very happy to hear that actually the efforts such as these have led to an increase in uptake, which is fantastic, and which is something which is to be highlighted and to be celebrated. And I hope things continue in that direction. I appreciate entirely why people can be apprehensive, especially given the historical abuse of pharmaceuticals and medicine foisted on various populations. And so I understand the apprehension, I understand the fear, which is why I'm sat here today with all of you, because I'm here as a hope representative of the profession to say that those things have happened. Things such as the Helsinki Declaration were put in place to ensure that they never happened again. And we exist here to address any questions that people might have in relation to that. So to answer your question, what do I have to say about what professionals in the profession, why they're apprehensive? I completely understand it, but we must combat that with education. And I'm scientifically trained, I'm medically trained, and as are many of my colleagues. And I understand that I'm trained to think in a certain way. I would in no way, shape or form give anybody advice in relation to accounting or in relation to computer science, and because those are their disciplines. So I hope the community can have faith and trust that people such as me are doing what we can to use our knowledge to inform them in a way that will benefit them. Rudi, has that answered my question? Your question?
Yes, thank you very much for that. And I go back to our key points around what we want the community to be informed, and that we're in a position to provide the reassurance so that they can make the choice at the end of the day. And it's important. And just a final point, there are some, as it relates to the benefits versus the risks and consequences, which you have touched on, of not taking the vaccine. And just to remind everybody that the vaccine immunity develops without causing any disease. Vaccines will work with your immune system, so it will be ready to fight the virus. No one knows who will get long COVID. And as has been pointed out already, that COVID-19 can have serious life-threatening complications. And there's no way to know how COVID-19 will affect you. If you get sick, you could spread the disease to friends, family, and others around you. Wearing masks and social distancing measures are not enough. So the warning is really clear for our communities, and we just hope they really take these important messages on board. So thank you very much. We'll be back again very soon over the next few weeks, and thank you and good night. And this was the Vaccine Confidence Dialogues. My name is Rudi Page. We had Dr. John, Bishop Francis Waihenya, and Bev Bogle, former nurse. So as always, we're doing our best, and we'll continue to do our best over the next few weeks to ensure that our community is informed, they receive the reassurance so that they can make the right choice in all our interests, which is mostly important. So thank you very much and good night.
Thank you for having me.
Good night.